For some reason, people keep asking me to make a cake of beans. Before I start a hyper-realistic cake, I know what I'm making and how I'm gonna make it.
But not today.
I'm gonna come up with today's cake design as I go. The only thing that I know at this moment is that I'm going to make cakes of 2 different side dishes. What side dishes? Maybe beans. I don't know. What tools and techniques will I use? I don't know. Am I gonna be able to pull this off?
I don't know.
We're about to find out. My name is Natalie Sideserf and I make cakes that don't look like cakes. And today I'm going to make a cake of 2 side dishes. Starting out with a couple tools and some modeling chocolate. Remember when you were a kid and you busted out Play-Doh for the first time? You pinched off a chunk and you rolled it on the table until you were left with a long snake? You tried so hard to make it perfect, but your darn fingers left little dents in the snake. Well, I have a solution. All you gotta do is grab something firm and flat, like a cutting board, a folder, a piece of cardboard, or in my case, this white plastic cake board. You just lightly rock it over top, and look how nice and smooth it looks now. I really wish I knew that during my Play-Doh days. But hey, at least I get to use that technique today because I'm gonna be hand rolling a lot of snakes because I'm making chocolate macaroni and quite a bit of it. This macaroni looks pretty good, but you know me. I gotta add all the details. We all know that macaroni is hollow, so I am poking holes on each end of each piece of macaroni so they look hollow, even though they're not.
It's an optical illusion.
I just gotta make, I don't know, 80 more pieces of macaroni and poke 160 holes in them. That's a lot of handmade macaroni. On to my second side dish. And I'm using modeling chocolate again. Only this time, I'm making
beans.
Turns out beans are much easier to sculpt than macaroni. I did it! I made all the chocolate mac and beans I need. This is where the 2 cakes go in very different directions because I am going to place these foods in 2 very different edible containers. The first container I'm gonna replicate is this paper to-go cup. I haven't decided if I'm gonna put the mac and cheese or the beans in here yet. I don't know. I'm gonna figure that out later. What do you guys think? Which side is best for this container? I just said the containers are gonna be edible, so you might be wondering why I'm filling the real paper container with cake. Well, I'm gonna show you in a little bit. First, I'm gonna place this cake in the fridge to chill. Just like the different containers, these 2 cakes have different sauces. Our macaroni will have a cheese sauce, and our beans will have a bean sauce. So I'm gonna make 2 different types of icings, and once they're made, I'll decide which icing will work best for which sauce. This is white chocolate ganache. It's the first icing I'm making. You can cook it on the stove with a double boiler like a fancy pants. Or you can just warm up white chocolate chips and heavy cream in the microwave like I just did. Now I just let it cool. For the second icing, I'm making a very simple glaze. The same glaze that goes on a donut. I've never made a glaze like this before, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. I'm just whisking milk and powdered sugar and a little bit of vanilla extract. This might be the easiest recipe known to man. That's all there is to it. We've got our chocolate ganache on the left and our glaze on the right. And now I have to figure out which one is gonna be cheese sauce and which one's gonna be bean sauce. The glaze that I just made is looking a little bit more loose, while the chocolate ganache is a bit thicker. Based on the consistency, which do you think I should use for the bean sauce? Chocolate ganache or the glaze? I'm thinking I'm gonna go with the glaze. Yep, I've decided. Let's color this glaze
Bean sauce brown.
The glaze is slightly see-through, which is good because bean sauce is a little see-through. But as I'm adding color, it's starting to look less see-through. I'm getting a little worried here. I don't know if this is gonna work. I might have to come up with something else. I've never made a glaze like this until today. I think it's the same glaze that goes on a donut, and donut glazes are a little see-through, but this doesn't look see-through. I think I made a mistake. Do you wear clothes or know someone who does? Well, get yourself some more by heading over to shop.sideserfcakes.com. That's where you can get some Sideserf Cake studio clothes. We also have coffee mugs, stickers, beach towels, all kinds of stuff. I'll put a link below so you don't get lost on your way to the store. And now back to the cake. Well, the best way to find out if I messed this up is if I try the glaze on a couple tester beans. I'd rather mess up a couple beans than the whole cake. So I'm pouring it on and it's still looking pretty opaque, but I haven't messed with it yet. I'm using a paintbrush to like push some of that glaze off so it's more thin. Thin. I think I know what the problem is. I think the glaze is still too thick. Well, too thick to read as a bean sauce. So I mixed in some water to thin it out a little more. I won't really know what this is gonna look like until I put it on the cake. Speaking of cake, remember that cake-filled paper cup? The one I put in the fridge? Well, it is time to rip the paper off. I needed to replicate the exact shape of that cup with cake, and this seemed like the best way to do it. Otherwise, I would have had to try to ice the cake by hand, and there is no way I'd get it as perfect as this. Here I've got another paper cup, and I'm cutting it up because I'm gonna use it as a stencil. My plan is to replicate the walls of this cup with edible paper, and this should help me cut my edible paper to the perfect size. And here is that edible paper. I just place the real paper on the edible paper and cut around it. Every time I make a hyper-realistic cake, if I think that I can use the real object to help me save time, I do it. And this is a great example of that. I mean, I am making a cake. It only lasts a couple days, so any shortcuts that I can come up with are helpful. My edible paper is the same size and shape as the real paper walls, so I hope that I'll be able to just wrap this around the cake with no problem. And it looks like we're good. It totally worked. I'm still a little worried about the glaze for my bean sauce, but I just gotta let it go and see how it looks when I pour it on the cake. Because it's time to work on the other icing I made, the chocolate ganache, which is gonna be the cheese sauce for my macaroni. I feel really good about the thickness and the color of this. I mean, it looks like cheese to me. Remember how I said I'm gonna place these cakes in two very different edible containers? That paper cup I've been working on is one, and this paper tray is the other. To make it, I'm using edible paper again, but this edible paper has a red print on it. How cool is that? I have a printer that prints with edible ink onto edible paper. I think this is gonna look awesome. I want the edible paper tray to be the exact same size as the real tray, so I'm using it as a stencil. I'm loving that this red tray is gonna bring some color into this cake design. You know what I just realized? I still have to figure out if this tray is gonna have beans in it or mac and cheese. What do you think would look best? Oh, I don't know. I am going to have to make a decision very soon, but I'm gonna put it off till then. Now I just gotta fold my edible paper the same way the real tray was folded. Edible paper is a little soft, so I'm placing it in the real tray to keep it from ripping while I work on the cake. It's also a great way to make sure that the shape of my tray matches the real tray as close as possible. Again, I'm using the real object to help me make my edible version. The top of the paper cup has a rounded edge. To replicate that, I'm extruding modeling chocolate. Yep, I'm making chocolate snakes again. You may be thinking,
Natalie, why didn't you use the extruder earlier to make the macaroni?
well, that is because I don't have a size tip that matches the thickness of the macaroni. All my options are either too thin or too thick, so I just rolled it out by hand instead. This paper cup is full of cake, but the edible tray is still cakeless. Let's change that. I'm keeping it nice and snug inside the real tray for safety, and now I'm filling it with cake. And now it is time to decide. Should I fill the tray with the mac and cheese or with the beans? Let's talk this out. Okay, so I feel like because the cheese sauce is a little thicker, it's gonna hold up better in this tray than the beans will. Right? I'm going cheese, we're doing it. Can't go back now. This really is the fun part. I get to add the macaroni now. I'm just dropping them over top because I think that'll look the most realistic. I find that if I'm too thoughtful with the placement, it tends to look kind of fake. I don't want it to look like a mac and cheese advertisement. I want it to look like a side at a backyard barbecue. And now it is time for my favorite part of this cake. Let's pour on the cheese. It's crazy that this is actually chocolate ganache and not real cheese. For real, this is tricking me. And I made it. Not every piece of macaroni is covered, so I'm just using a paintbrush to brush the ganache over any of the uncoated macaroni. And now it is time to finish up the beans. I am so worried about this glaze, but I gotta do it. Let's pour it in. This is the first time I'm using a glaze like this for a hyper-realistic cake, so it's really hard for me to predict how this is gonna look. All right, you guys, let me know what you think. Do you think I made the right choice using a glaze for the bean sauce and chocolate ganache for the cheese? And there you have it. First, a mac and cheese cake with an edible tray and all. I still can't believe that that's chocolate ganache and not cheese. It's gonna be so confusing to eat. Now let's cut it. How crazy is that? Now let's cut the beans. I really like how the glaze shines. I was a little nervous that the cup might have been a little too thin, but it really seems to be holding up. All right, let's cut it. Oh my, look how cool that glaze looks. I'm so glad I used it. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel because I post a brand new cake every week. And I'll see you next week for another cake.